Well, good morning, TV friends and neighbors. That's how Mr. Rogers used to say it, and he did it well. It's still television, even if it's via YouTube. So, looks like there aren't really many places for cars to go, so sooner or later it'll get backed up, and someone will let me out. They recently gave this road, this is US Route 23 out here, and they recently applied, like in the autumn, they applied a thing called a road diet. And what that does is it takes a 4-lane road, which was really good at handling high capacity, and it took it and it cut it down to a 2-lane road with a center turn lane and bike lanes. Now, the bike lanes, they get filled up with debris and stuff like that. So it's not, and it's, I think it's way too close to the cars to ride. I mean, it beats having no bike lane. Technically, the vehicles are supposed to yield, so they had to add a bike lane with a road diet. Otherwise, bikes would be legally taking up the full lane and making all the traffic travel at bicycle speed, which I'm sure they would have loved, but they didn't end up doing that. Because probably it would have caused safety issues. People would have been passing in the left turn only lane, and I did a ton of research on it, and my conclusion was that the way that the signage is posted, the left turn lane here is only for if you're traveling on US Route 23, you may get into the center turn lane and you may turn out of it, but you are not to turn into it. So, because then you're not doing a left turn anymore. So, let's see. Yeah, I'm supposed to go down to, supposed to take a rather circuitous route this morning. You can see why. Looks like, oh, that's just a bus stopping. Man, traffic is just a mess. I mean, they did a road diet, and they intentionally were trying to, traffic used to flow really well, and they intentionally put in a road diet in conjunction with a bunch of traffic calming to funnel everyone onto exactly the same small set of streets. And then they took down the number of lanes on those streets. I mean, they've just done everything possible to impede traffic and reduce capacity. And I mean, it can't be unintentional. And also, you can tell when people are going out of their way, like when they get mad because I mean, not like raging mad, but when they get testy because you used a term that they're trying to avoid, because that's what they're really trying to do. They're trying to talk around what they're really trying to do, and they're trying to dress it up. So when you talk about traffic calming measures, which even that is a dressed up term, they're trying to obstruct traffic flow. And but people have learned that traffic calming, even though a handful of neighbors tend to be in favor of it, it's really a symptom of poor engineering overall that is a little more expensive to fix, a lot more expensive to fix. And so it's easier just to throw in some speed bumps and stuff like that than to actually go and re-engineer the flow of a segment of the city. So yeah, in my neighborhood they're doing that. They're putting in rain gardens, they call them. Now, rain garden doesn't sound like a traffic calming measure, because rain is not why rain can be traffic calming. There seem to be a ton of accidents anytime it rains, but in gardens, they're calming, but you don't usually drive in gardens, and you're not supposed to drive in the rain gardens either. But a lot of our drivers in my neighborhood are apparently unable to keep their cars out of the great rain gardens. So what is a rain garden? Well, where I grew up in a rural area, a rain garden was known as a ditch. So we've taken an urban area with sewer systems, storm sewer systems, which alleviate the need for a ditch if properly designed. And the sewer system was not properly designed for the amount of growth. It was never upgraded as the growth took place. So whenever there's a, rain, it doesn't have to be a tremendous rain, just like a summer thunderstorm, then all the storm sewers fill up and overflow, and then they end up overflowing into the sanitary sewer, which is, the poop and pee and stuff like that. So it goes in there, and then that system gets overwhelmed, and which incidentally, Columbus, look up the Columbus experiment. It was an experiment that happened sometime in the 1800s. There was a senator traveling around, and he came to Columbus, and the water was so bad he got cholera and died. And so then they worked with some people at MIT, and they figured out, well, maybe if we try to treat the water and make it clean, then, and not containing a bunch of pathogens, then maybe people won't die from it. And so they're like, well, this sounds like an interesting experiment. And so they implemented it here in Columbus on a small scale, and it turned out no one died of cholera anymore from that water source. So then, probably the city you're living in now has a water treatment facility. Now, I know the Romans had aquifers and aqueducts and stuff like that, like indoor plumbing and stuff like that, but they didn't really have water treatment that I'm aware of. So, they could still have cholera outbreaks and stuff. But anyway, yeah, it was poorly designed. So the sewer system would get overwhelmed, and then it would just dump raw sewage, which is, what you would expect to find in the bottom of a porta potty, except minus the disease-killing chemicals that give it that lovely blue color and that wonderful smell. It was just that stuff, and it would, anytime it rained a bunch, it would overflow into the river, and it happened like several times a year. And I like to go by the river. Oh, there's someone passing everyone behind me. They've got their four-way flashers on, because that putting on your four-way flashers is like a cloak of invisibility. If you just put on your four-way flashers and pretend to be a disabled vehicle dealing with an emergency, then you can just do whatever you want. You can drive through people's yards. You can leave your car parked, perpendicular to the freeway, just in the middle of the freeway, and you can drive on the lane, the berm, and pass everyone. So here we've got the guy coming up behind me, so we'll get his plate. He's also texting. He's driving a Kia. He's undoubtedly he's very important individual who has to get where he's going much faster than everyone else. So he has to drive past them on the berm, which is prohibited. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, where were we? Oh yeah, there were sewer overflows. So anyway, the EPA came in and said, hey, City of Columbus, corporation that is known as the City of Columbus, because everyone hates corporations, except all the people I know who hate corporations love corporations that are like government corporations, like the city. And so they come to the city and they say, hey, look, what do you think you're doing? You can't just dump raw sewage into the river all the time. And so that happened all throughout the 80s and 90s. There was a city that grew a lot near where I grew up. It was called Dublin, Ohio. It's where the Columbus Zoo is, though technically it's now in Columbus. But yeah, they had this they had a problem with sewage overflows, and they were dumping sewage in the river all the time. And so everyone was like, oh, Dublin, you're so terrible, you have to fix this right away. Well, like at the same time Columbus was doing it, and I don't remember as much of an uproar. It was always Dublin doing it wrong. So Dublin went, and they did what they were supposed to do, as far as I know, because I've been to Dublin, and they don't have rain gardens, and they don't have, they're not in the news for sewage overflows. I guess I should go and check up on that and see if it actually worked. But they just went and spent a ton of money on fixing their sewer system, I believe, and then they don't have the problem. So they went and they upgraded their capacity and everything, and they've had a much more growth since then. But they, as I understand it, they, put the, they require new developments and stuff to upgrade the sewage system. Anyway, so I'm just not trying to cut in line around people. I just want to kind of take my place here in the queue. I'm just not trying to cut in line around people. I just want to kind of take my place here in the queue. I'm just not trying to cut in line around people. I just want to kind of take my place here in the queue. So this guy realized that I'm not just passing everyone, and what are you doing, dude? I'm just getting out and claiming my road. You can't just pass me. I should get a recording of that too. I need to start
will now start
putting these in so that people can, like, so you can see the craziness. Like, so I was at a stop sign back there, and I had come to a complete stop, but then I wanted to go, you know, there was a clear spot, no one was coming off the freeway ramp, so I wanted to get over and actually, you know, claim the actual roadway that I was going to be using. And some guy's like, he wanted to go around me when there was like a red light ahead and the stop sign and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's pretty obvious what I was trying to do, and I used my turn signals. Oh, but he's going to pass everyone on the side. Echo Sierra Paul 2710. I like to use oh, here, I'll bump that. So yeah, he's going to keep going by. Yeah, it's really bad traffic this morning. There's, I think, an accident. Yeah, he just merged, and he went past everyone instead of just merging in at the at the most convenient opportunity for other people, like where someone was yielding. He drove up until he was driving through the, you know, white warning lines, and then just kind of rammed in on someone. And you can tell it wasn't wanted because the person ahead, you know, they had to brake, which, you know, if you're just kind of yielding to someone getting on the freeway, I mean, the way I judge it is whether or not you have to brake. So anyway, yeah, traffic's bad, so people with behavioral dysfunctions come out of the woodwork. So anyway, oh, and one of the problems too is that they made this roadway so that it faces the sun. It bends around, and so for a minute you're driving looking into the sun, and you can see it. Like, I wonder if I can get this like cut in from the video maybe, but you can see it because people, like, they round the bend, and then they slam on their brakes, and then they put their visor down, and then they drive a little bit more normally. But it's like I mean, I drive this every day. I know that it gets sunny, and one of the tricks I'm using right now is I'm using a truck, you know, to make a shadow, which it's like, you know, use your environment to your advantage. You're a tool using human. Now, other traffic is going to prevent that. So, but yeah, it really does. You can, hopefully the dash cam, I can cut in on it, and you can see some of the video, some of the issues that it's, you know, that it causes. And also today, it's kind of reflective. The ground is a little moist, so the asphalt is reflecting a lot of light. So it's like just having one big vertical sun in front of you. And a lot of people just, they don't seem to be able to deal with it at all. They, you know, the speed traveled here is like, it's like we're doing like 20 miles an hour in a 65 zone. And it's like that even on nice mornings. Like if it's a cloudy morning, then it's pretty normal. But on a morning like today, it's a little iffy. So there's also an exit that tends to back up. 17th Avenue, it's the fairgrounds, so anytime there's an event and there's an accident ahead, so I'm supposed to, oh man, Waze, I don't know what you're doing. Waze wants me to get off on 670, which I'm sure everyone's getting off on 670. Well, I don't know when I'm gonna get to work today. This is just a mess. This is, so anyway, back what I was talking about is this whole sewage thing. So it actually has to do with the traffic being a total mess. So Columbus is pretty much a giant grid, and you can really just drive around you can just kind of get on the road and then dead reckon where you're going, and if a road ends, you just jog over, and then there's another road that continues on. And there are a couple exceptions due to the river and stuff like that, but eventually if you follow that approach, you're going to be able to find a road that crosses it, and because the river's not super huge. And so we have quite a few bridges that cross it, unlike some cities where they have like 2 giant bridges or something like that. So yeah, it's really like, it's not you know, traffic shouldn't be an issue, except they keep funneling stuff onto the freeways and onto a handful of major streets, and then they make it really hard with traffic calming and other schemes to just have traffic kind of mush through the neighborhoods. And I realize that some people drive really fast, but the speed limit in my neighborhood is 25 miles an hour, and that's the like legal minimum that they seem to be comfortable with putting in a neighborhood. I don't know, I mean, I've seen slower signs in extremely local areas, but the speed limit through neighborhoods seems to be 25, and it's posted as such everywhere. So that's plenty fast for these neighborhoods, but some people drive faster, and so they want to put in traffic calming that makes it harder to do that. So yeah, it's like, so how does sewage play into this? Well, so Dublin had the sewage problem. They got it all squared away, apparently. They spent a ton of money on upgrading their sewage system. And the city of Columbus had the same mandate put on them. They're like, hey, look, you got to fix your sewage system. And so they went and they spec'd it out, and they're like, all right, it's going to cost this much. And then they went and they told everyone, oh, we got to spend all this money on sewage, and so we're going to raise your taxes, and you got to vote for it, because you know, but it's like an EPA thing, so please vote for it, or else we're going to start, you know, the EPA is going to come and nuke our city or something like that. And they go and they put they get this idea, is like, hey, what if instead of doing the job right, which is fixing the sewer systems so that they can handle rain, why don't we do something a little different, and we'll just dig ditches all over. And you know, the ditches, they go and the idea is to like help bust through the concrete jungle that is, you know, residential Columbus with all its big grassy lawns, and essentially divert the water that falls on the streets and stuff, and put that on, you know, you know, in these big pits where they'll kind of soak in a little bit, and then they also have like kind of an overflow that goes into the traditional sewer. So you catch the water in the street, you run it off into these pits, you try and let it soak in as much as you can, but then if it doesn't, then you just go, oh, what the heck, screw it, right into the sewer system again, and then this would be the storm sewer system ideally. And then after that happens, it still could result in a sewage overflow, but it's going to happen less often, and that's just an amount of EPA involvement that we're happy with, I guess. So, which, you know, see, the thing is, if homeowners were responsible for hiring a private sewage disposal company, the amount of sewage overflows into the river tolerable would be 0. And it'd be, oh, this horrible, incompetent company, run them out of business, get someone who knows how to do it, get someone who will spend the money right. But with the city, no. It's like, hey, we're going to go and fix it right. Oh, on second thought, we like money. We like having lots of extra money for pet projects and kickbacks to our political supporters. So why don't we half-ass it, and then we'll say that we did the job right, but then we'll have a bunch of this extra money that we can, you know, in a slush fund that we can spend on other projects. So that's essentially what's going on. And I don't understand, like, I guess as a side benefit, they're necking down all of the you know, transit in the neighborhood. So I mean, what I've heard people say, and by people I mean traffic engineers that work for the city, so I don't have anything against traffic engineers per se, but the ones that work for the city, I think calling them people might be a stretch sometimes. because look, I mean, this is what they're doing is sociopathic. And if they're being asked to do it by political people, then they need to tell them, you're being sociopaths, I'm not doing it, and get fired, and then go work in the private sector. But they're not. They're working in the public sector, and they're playing along with this. And they're pointing fingers. I talked with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission about the traffic calming and stuff like this, and they just said, oh, not our project. Yeah, I agree, it's totally screwed up. I'm not going to touch that topic with a 15-foot pole because, you know, that's the city. So it's apparently the city's planners. But anyway, yeah, it's just ridiculous. I mean, one of the nice things about my neighborhood is you can be driving along and there can be a period of traffic density, let's call it that. And you just, you can go around it, and it's a big grid. So just everyone kind of goes around it, and then they go through the neighborhoods. And I drive the speed limit, so, you know, it shouldn't be a problem. But then you get all these people who go and move to the city on a giant grid, or even better, these people who go and live, they find a road, like a really good example is the road, it's called North Broadway. And I spent a lot of time on North Broadway my entire life because my grandfather lived in that area, and so I've driven or been a passenger on North Broadway for a long time. I've seen lots of traffic flows on it, and I'm very familiar with its problems. And even when I bike across North Broadway. So I'm very familiar with it. If you look at it on a map, it connects two freeways. It was built as a major road, a major crosstown road, but then they built two freeways, and they're like, this is a great relief valve between the two freeways. So if there's an accident or something on one, everyone's going to go across on North Broadway, and plus it's a major east-west thoroughfare. So then you get a bunch of people who would rather apparently be living in a shack in the middle of Montana or something, or Idaho, and instead they look for a place to live in the capital city of Ohio, which is like one of the 15th largest metro areas in the nation. And then way inside the outer belt, not in the suburb of anything, they go and they find one of the few roads that has been a major arterial for decades, if not 100 years, probably not 100, but at least decades, and coming up on 100 years. And then they move in, and they buy like a $1 million house, which I don't understand why a house that is on, I mean, okay, my dad theorizes that it's because there's high visibility. So it's no fun to have $1 million house out in the middle of Idaho. So these people, they want $1 million house on a busy street so everyone can see that they have $1 million house. So I think that may be reasonable. It's actually the street our mayor lives on. So could be part of the reason why he moved there, because, you know, he wants to be in the limelight. That's why he's a mayor. People who don't want to be in the limelight don't become the mayor of a large, you know, city. So yeah, they go and they move there, and then they want everyone else. They spend the rest of their time living there, complaining that they're in a city. They want, they essentially want, I mean, what they really want is they want the road shut down and turned into like a jogging trail or something, or a bike trail. They don't want any cars on it, but they realize they have to deal with it, and they don't deal with it themselves. Like I pointed out, I said, you know, sometimes traffic is really bad there, and so the traffic can't possibly go faster than 25 miles an hour. So I say to them, there's no law against driving below the speed limit, you know, unless it's posted, and it's not in residential areas. No one's going to get mad at you for doing 10 or 15. I mean, people will get mad, but like the cops are not going to pull you over for doing 10 or 15 miles an hour in a 25 zone. And even if they did, you just show up in court and go, well, that's what I thought. You know, here are the various conditions that I thought that would be the safest thing to do. I saw children playing. I saw, you know, all these arguments that the people use for the government coming in and putting the speed limit ridiculously low. Those are all arguments for driving slowly themselves. But they don't want to do that unless the government tells them to. Like, they're too cowardly to just drive slowly. I mean, I did that a town near where I grew up. They reduced their speed limit to be ridiculously slow, but everyone in the town was like in a super big hurry, and they tended to have like much fancier cars than mine, like Lexuses and BMWs and stuff like that. So every time I got to their 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, I obeyed it religiously. And they hated it. It drove them crazy. People would like, you'd look behind you in the rearview mirror and they'd be like tearing their hair out and screaming, and then they'd drive past you on the no passing zone and like run head on into the school bus, and just they'd go mad. And it's their freaking rules. I didn't make it. I don't live there. And it's their cops that are getting funded by it. Speaking of cops, there's one right there. I'll just put it in there in case I want to edit this into the video. So yeah, it's really interesting to me that these people, they go and like I live near railroad tracks because I liked trains growing up, and I still like trains. It's a hobby of mine, and it's really cool, instead of having to always go somewhere and look at trains, to just be able to look out the window and see trains going by a significant proportion of the time, or to go on a little walk with my toddler and be able to just walk to the railroad tracks anytime we want and not have to like plan some big journey. I mean, when I was a kid, trains were a rarity. I mean, I saw them very often, but you know, they weren't as common as they are for me now, because I'd always have to drive a couple miles to get to the railroad tracks, and we'd have to sit around there, and you couldn't really do anything else. When you live by the railroad tracks, you can just look out the window and see what's going on. So yeah, it's really interesting to me that people will go, like someone moved in near the railroad tracks, which I don't see, like there are, I think the number is, it's around 24 trains a day. It's very, very busy. It's called the Heartland Corridor. It stretches from the port of Norfolk to Chicago, and it is just super high capacity, just lots and lots of trains all the time. And so great place for someone like me who likes trains to live. But if you're going and looking for a house or something, that means if you spend more than an hour looking at your house, you're gonna at least see one train. And most people spend more than that time like shopping around for houses. And I wonder why that person needed to
Manual recording
ask
will
me
now
to go
start.
to a stop sign. It's weird. And it's nothing wrong illegally or anything, but it's just kind of weird. I mean, I'm doing the speed limit here, and they're, or what I consider reasonable considering the sun and the usual pedestrian traffic here and how the roads could be icy and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just ridiculous because these people, they go, and you'd think that during the course of during the course of looking for their new house, they would notice something like the Heartland Corridor. I mean, they'd have to drive over it to get there, or drive under it, and they hear the horns are honking because there's a railroad crossing nearby. So there are just all these things that it's like, it's a freaking train, it's a train horn. You don't know that, like, how did you not notice, you know? And then the second they move in, they are coming up, they're like, a bunch of them came up with an idea. They heard about these quiet crossings where you ban the trains from honking to warn people that a train is coming. And they can work, and I think they make sense in certain circumstances, but they cost millions and millions of dollars. And usually it's easiest to implement them when there's only one railroad. But once again, I moved in where there are two railroads, and that requires like an unheard of amount of planning and deal, because each railroad has to have their own separate, they each have their own separate quiet crossings process of, like, you know, agreeing to build one and upgrade and all this kind of stuff, because they can be safer. The quiet crossings, they prevent drivers from driving around the gates, and they have more gates that prevent you from, you know, driving around them and stuff like that. And then they also have usually some kind of warning device that's right there at the crossing. So they might have a horn that's right at the crossing and much quieter, so the drivers right there can hear it. Or they might have a bell or something, and they have flashing lights and all this stuff. It's kind of hard to miss. But yeah, it's like much harder to do. So they went and they dug into it, and then when they thought that it was going to be someone else paying for it, they were all for it. But then once they found out that they were going to have to find some way to pay for it, themselves, and there was no money, like the city wasn't going to pay for it, but there was like no mechanism for taxing people that was ever going to fly, and they weren't going to pony up the money. Like no local businesses cared enough about it. In fact, the local businesses, one of them's a train store, and they were against it. They liked the trains honking. They were there the same reason as I was. And it turns out many of the other residents, I was happy to find out, they also live there because they like the trains. So I thought it was interesting. So yeah, it was just interesting because that whole thing just fell apart, because everyone was for it when they thought it was someone else's, when they thought they could impose on someone else. But then once the solution became for them to deal with it personally at their own expense, suddenly it was not an issue anymore. And so that's how it is. There are some people who think the rain gardens are a wonderful idea. One guy proudly wishes he had one, and I think all the neighbors should chip in and just dig a giant pit in his yard because he keeps begging for it so much. We should just do a Kickstarter, and I should set one up. I'll set up a Kickstarter, and I'll have people from all over the world. I'm sure there are enough people that's like a Kickstarter to dig up this idiot's yard. And I guarantee once we have like, $12 million to dig up his entire yard and just leave like a house sitting on a block basement there, it's like, well, you wanted a giant pit in your yard. He'll be like, oh no, I'm not interested in it anymore. And I'll be like, but it's free. And everyone else went to the trouble to do it. So anyway, I got to go to work. Man, that was a really long, irritating commute. But I'm going to have to, because of all the adventures, I think I'm going to postpone uploading this, so it might not actually go up until tomorrow, and I'll have to get a bunch of dash cam footage and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be a mess, but I think it might be worth it. I think it'll be an interesting one, and hopefully you guys are you found it interesting to hear about like some of these goofy things that cities try, and the goofy people who live in cities who want to go along with them. And it's like, my wife wonders why I just want to go and live away from them, because I know there are goofy people in the country, but at least I can have like a fence and a perimeter and a big sign that says come back with a warrant to keep all the people out that I don't want to talk to. And if they have a warrant, then we'll schedule an appointment and they can come and sit down at my table, and we'll have some chai tea or something. So anyway, that's it for me today. My wife said that at the end of my videos I cut them off too abruptly, so I need to give people an opportunity to like and subscribe and click the little bell and maybe pause it so you don't accidentally go on to the next video, and a whole bunch of whatever you need to do. Maybe go to the bathroom, I don't know. Just, she said there needs to be more time, so consider this ending a little bit more time so you can do all that stuff, and then I'll like get all my stuff ready and stuff, and then I'll shut off the camera, and that should give you enough time. I mean, you've already spent like, I don't know, maybe a half hour to an hour. I don't really remember. It's like, I think I left around, yeah, maybe, I think I left around like 8:15, and it's like almost 9. So I'll get my stuff ready. You've already invested that much time. I'll give you just a couple of free moments to yourself. A moment of zen. And I'm gonna go and turn off my stuff here. Well, I hope you guys have a fun day. And if you have a vlog or anything, be sure to post it. I kind of like this to be more of a dialogue. My viewers, they seem to be watching the videos. There's a cadre. There's a cadre of people that are watching the videos, and my wife's one of them. She just loves watching my videos. It's really weird. It's like I go up to her, I'm like, hey honey, I don't call her honey, but I do in YouTube. I say, hey honey, I'd like to go and do such and such, or I'd like to, I need to talk to you for some reason. She's like, shh, I'm listening to this guy. He's talking about interesting stuff. And I'm like, who that, how is it that some tool on YouTube is more important than what I have to say to you right now? And then she goes, and I look, and the kids are like, Daddy's on TV and stuff. So that's fun. And now they want to do a vlog too. I'm trying to figure out a way to, like, well, I'm gonna have to teach them. They can vlog when they can do it all by themselves, I think. So they're already working on the camera work. I'll have to show them how to download it and do video editing and upload to YouTube. I don't think, I guess I'll have to have like a channel on my account to let them do it, because I don't think 6-year-olds and 2-year-olds are allowed to have YouTube accounts under the terms of service. Seems like 12 or 13 is the magical age where it's okay to be an internet citizen according to the companies that provide the services. All right. Hopefully that's been enough interlude. I'm gonna go out into the cold and walk up to my place of business. And some of you I will be maybe IMing with throughout the day. All right, lights off, everything, car off, camera off. Bye-bye.